Hey everybody, it's been a minute. I'm Ben. Welcome to Comic Book Breakdown. 2 Saturdays ago was Free Comic Book Day, and it's the first time I've really been able to focus my attention on comic books for a little length of time. So join me, won't you, for a quick review of what I got on Free Comic Book Day 2025. As a quick reminder, if you're wondering where Comic Book Breakdown has been the past couple of weeks, why there's been no activity on the channel almost whatsoever, it's because my wife and I had a baby last December, and my focus is on taking care of my baby and my cat screaming at me over on the sidelines. That part of the process has gone well. Kari is doing great. She's a joy to deal with every day, which doesn't mean she's not a handful as well, but I wouldn't trade having her for anything. The flip side of that, however, has meant that I have not had the money or time or attention to be into comic books the way that I normally like to. I have missed Captain America New World Order. I've missed the Thunderbolts. I've missed Daredevil. It's been crap. And I haven't been buying comic books pretty much for the most part. I had been buying comic books with the intent of talking about them, and then last month finances really took a hit. And so I have not been buying anything new. So Free Comic Book Day was kind of a big deal for me. I was able to get comic books and go to a comic book store and interact and have a good time. And so I teamed up with my buddy Ephraim. You've seen him on the channel before. You would have heard him if you've listened to some of our older episodes. Ephraim and I teamed up with Kari, and we went to a few local comic stores to pick up some of the books that came out. I hate going to Free Comic Book Day at comic stores and just taking the free stuff and then leaving. Comic book stores pay for the free comic books. The idea of the event is to get you into the store and to get you spending money, and normally I'm more than willing to do that. But this year, at the very least, I just can't. So unfortunately, I got the free stuff and then I GTFO'd. Here's what I got. First book, The Amazing Spider-Man and Ultimate Universe one-shot from Marvel Comics. I'm covering the Marvel stuff first because for me it's the fastest. This book was largely written by Joe Kelly, I think. Yeah, the Amazing Spider-Man stuff was written by Joe Kelly. Dennis Camp wrote the Ultimate Spider-Man stuff. For a free comic book, this was fine. The Amazing Spider-Man does a pretty good job of taking like a snapshot of Peter Parker's current life and situation, which is, hey, guess what? He's a broke single guy who's dating a girl that he doesn't have the time to date because he has responsibilities as Spider-Man. As Spider-Man, he stopped somebody from attempting to assassinate Norman Osborn, who apparently was almost assassinated in a recent issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. Artwork by John Romita Jr. I do like John Romita Jr.'s artwork in general. I'm kind of sick of him on Spider-Man. I feel like it's the only thing that he does these days. And I feel like he's gotten so fast as an artist. I feel like he's suffering from the same problem that I have with Mark Bagley these days, which is he's so fast and he produces his pages so quickly that I do think that the overall quality of the pages has dropped. They're fine, they work, they convey the information, but nothing about them makes me go like, oh, look at that. And I know over in the Amazing Spider-Man ongoing series, the book's being drawn by Pepe Larraz, whose artwork is like top tier amazing stuff recently. So the Amazing Spider-Man part didn't really do much for me. The Ultimate Universe part is the setup for the Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion event, in which Miles Morales will be leaving the 616 Marvel Universe and hopping back into the Ultimate Universe, except it's not the Ultimate Universe that he came from. That place got eaten and blown up. He's going to be going to the new Ultimate Universe, which is the one that Marvel has been publishing for the past couple months. He's going to be visiting all of the books over there. It looks like this story seems to set up the idea that Miles is going to be going to the Ultimate Universe to rescue his sister, which I think is a great motivation. And again, this serves as a pretty good recap for what Miles has been going through over the past year of comics on his side of things. The artwork looked really good. Artwork was by front cover credits Sharf, but I do not know Sharf's first name. Will it tell me in here? It doesn't seem that it will. Here we go. Jonas Scharf. Oh, written by Cody Ziegler and Dennis Camp. I'm sorry. So this was a fine issue. I'm glad it was free. If I had to pay for this, I'd be pretty upset. It works as a setting up point for the Ultimate Universe, and it works as a pretty good recap of The Amazing Spider-Man, which I wasn't going to be buying anyways, even if I was able to buy comic books. So this was fine. Off to a weak start. Fantastic Four was one of my big picks. I have been loving the Fantastic Four ongoing series written by Ryan North, art with a variety of artists, most recently with Carlos Gomez until he left for the all-new Venom ongoing series. Part of the reason that I was interested in this is because the Fantastic Four is about to get a cancellation and reboot as the Fantastic Four, but with Humberto Ramos on artwork. I'm a fan of Ramos from back when I was a kid, and he was getting hyped up for me when he was joining Cliffhanger Comics with his comic book Crimson. I love his art style. I love the pointiness. I love the animated feel of it. I know that Ramos is a big fan of Spider-Man, and typically the past several years when Ramos has wanted to work with Marvel, it's been on Spider-Man stuff. So him being on Fantastic Four is a bit of a weird fit. This is kind of a promo, so to speak, of what you'll see in the Fantastic Four ongoing series. And I will admit that it works fine. The Fantastic Four end up being accidentally summoned to another universe by a group of kids who are having like a midnight seance party kind of thing. Turns out that the kids used some kind of weird material that would attract the open end of an interdimensional portal. So if the Fantastic Four are in Universe A opening a portal, over in Universe B, these kids would then automatically like auto-connect the portal to their end and spit them out. And of course the monsters get spit out, the Fantastic Four fight them, they go back to their home reality, but then at the end there's a really cute thing where the Thing comes back and he's like, hey, Reed's figured out a way for your portal to connect to non-threatening people, but we figured you might want to hang out with the Fantastic Four every once in a while. How about I meet your parents and scare the pants off of them? Which is really cute and pretty fun. I do have to admit that I did not really like Ramos's artwork here, not because it's bad, but just because he's such an odd fit for the Fantastic Four. Ramos's artwork to me always leans really young when he is drawing characters. And so handling a group of characters like the Fantastic Four, who are all typically older, or at least are depicted as older, feels really weird. I did like his inventiveness with Reed's stretchiness, like he draws that really well. His Thing looks really good. His Sue Storm is fine. Nothing of note there. I do think that his Johnny looks increasingly like he's homeless. And admittedly, Johnny's been rocking a mustache over in the Fantastic Four anyways, and he's been growing his hair out, but it's kind of reaching like where I'm at, where it's just going to be a big mess if you don't take care of it. And Johnny typically takes care of it, so that's very surprising. Over at DC, this is a flip book. It's 2 comics in 1. I did not know that because I didn't do any research going into Free Comic Book Day because I've been taking care of a baby. So I got this issue twice, which would work out if I was interested in Superman Unlimited, the new series coming from DC, which unfortunately for me, I'm not. Superman Unlimited is going to be written by Dan Slott of Marvel, whose work I typically enjoy. Dan Slott's known for being one of the longest-running writers on Spider-Man in recent history. He's done a ton of big storylines that have had like huge impacts on Spider-Man's modern-day presence. He's one of the people who wrote the original Spider-Verse event. He created Cindy Moon, aka Silk, a whole bunch of stuff. But I got to admit, this didn't do pretty much anything for me. It's a good recap of Superman and who he is and his surrounding cast, and then it sets up the idea that there's a giant meteorite headed to Earth, and when Superman goes and punches the meteorite to try and break it up, it turns out the meteorite had just been like coated with a thin layer of like some other type of material, because underneath it, it's all kryptonite. And Dan Slott has said in interviews that he's basically shooting a kryptonite rock onto Earth, so that way there's more of this source of Superman's weakness available on the planet. So, like, the world's going to become a more dangerous place for Superman. And I do think that's really interesting, but I just don't really care much for Superman overall. Good morning. Oh? Good sigh. Mwah. Hey, everybody. If you're a listener, I doubt you're going to get a chance to hear her this morning, but my wife just dropped off my baby, Kari, who just woke up from a long night's sleep. Hey. Yeah. Listeners, this is my daughter. Ooh, you looked at the camera all right. Not bad. Big yawn. Big yawn. Yeah, you did wake up early. She typically sleeps until about 9. It's 8:30 when I'm recording this. Anyways, the other DC comic, the flip book comic that I got, would have been the All-In Absolute Universe special. This actually interests me. I've been meaning to cover the Absolute comics here on the show for a minute now. Hello, you want to take a look? I just haven't had the time. I read Absolute Batman 1 through 6, and I really enjoyed them, and I had all these ideas for, like, oh, I could do a small episode talking about this aspect of it, and this aspect of it, and that could be really cool and really interesting, and I've just never had the time to sit down and do it. I tried to record a proto episode with Kari, actually, but I just didn't like the way that it turned out. I'm all over the place. It's a bunch of jibber-jabber, so I scrapped it. But, the Absolute Universe, of course, is the universe of evil of choice currently over at DC Universe. The idea is that Darkseid left the main DC Universe and became the universe next door. So, like, where the DC Universe is rooted in hope, and the idea that good will eventually triumph over evil no matter what happens, this is a universe where the idea is evil will always triumph over good. No matter how hard you struggle or how much effort you put into it, you're going to lose because the world's a bad place. It is the pessimism to the DC Universe's optimism, which I do think is a really cool idea. It's a little hard to explain that succinctly, and it has meant that the heroes of the DC Universe are a little bit more extreme, a little bit harder, a little bit meaner. But like I said, I've been really enjoying Ultimate Batman. I liked the first issue of Ultimate Superman. It didn't do much for me. I liked the first issue of Ultimate Wonder Woman the least. It didn't do much for me. I have read Ultimate. I keep saying Ultimate. Absolute. I'm sorry. I have read Absolute Martian Manhunter, and that's a crazy book. That's going to be a good one. And then I read Absolute Green Lantern, which was fine. It's totally a setup issue. It's got some interesting twists to the classic Green Lantern mythology. That should be fine. But the idea with the Absolute Universe special here for Free Comic Book Day is there's going to be an Absolute event coming up, which will see these characters all connect and cross over for the first time. I want to say it's going to happen either at the end of the first year of their titles, or it'll be at the start of the second year of their books. And the book basically stars a character called Absolute Mirror Master. He's one of the Flash's rogues, who basically is using reflections to peek in on all of these new superpowered characters in the Absolute Universe. So you see him take a look at Absolute Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. The one issue that I didn't get a chance to pick up was Absolute Flash. And so I know nothing about that particular character, but at the end of the issue, you're like, oh, okay, so Mirror Master's this connective tissue between them all. That's interesting. But then another Mirror Master steps through a mirror, and he's like, hey, you want to have a conversation? And I believe he's meant to be like the main DC Universe Mirror Master. So this guy's going to be doing something. I do think that's an interesting metaphor, especially since the Absolute Universe is meant to be like this dark mirror of the main DC Universe. I think that's a pretty cool bit of storytelling. And it could set up a really interesting story. I do not know. Like I said, overall, I'd say I enjoy the Absolute Universe. I just can't afford it right now. But I did enjoy overall this issue. Who wrote this one? Oh, I am unsure. Kari. Jeff Lemire, who I believe is writing Absolute Flash. So it makes sense that he would be writing the Mirror Master part of it. But yeah, overall, I like this one way more than the Superman one, but admittedly, the Superman one didn't really have my interest overall. I was going to say, before I got baby interrupted, that while I like Dan Slott's Spider-Man, and I think that he does a good job of, like, writing normal Peter Parker Spider-Man, so I think he'll do a good job writing normal Clark Kent Superman, the downside is that, like, if you read just a non-event story from Dan Slott, they don't feel like they matter at all. They feel very throwaway. They do feel very like classic in that you're like, yeah, that's a Spider-Man story, but you don't remember the meat of that story or what was going on in it until something crazy happens, and then, oh, Peter Parker got murdered or his brain was swamped by Dr. Octopus or something, whatever the case may be. Good yawn. Ooh. I'll feed you in just a second. We're just going to wrap this one up. So while I wasn't super invested in the Superman Unplugged, Unchained, Unlimited, while I was not interested in the Superman Unlimited stuff, I did particularly like the Absolute Universe stuff. I think it's a good recap of kind of like, here are the people who are at play in the Absolute Universe, and it gives you just enough of a snippet to be like, are you interested? If so, go check out those comics, and if you're not, then you're not going to care anyways. I've got four more books from Big Yawn. Good job. I've got 4 more books to cover. I'm going to go take care of my baby. Hopefully I'll be back relatively soon. Okay, everyone, we have gone through the baby basics. She's been changed. She's had her morning exercises, and she's had some morning food. She didn't finish her bottle, so she'll need to get back on that. But for the moment, Kari should be pretty set, so we're going to see if I can finish recording. Right. Okay. The next comic is a comic that I'm always excited for on Free Comic Book Day. It was Udon's Street Fighter versus Rival Schools. Udon is pretty good at always releasing a Free Comic Book Day issue every year. To the best of my knowledge, Udon is the only publisher in America that has the licensing rights to Capcom's library of titles. So they publish Street Fighter stuff, Darkstalkers, Rival Schools, Megaman, Monster Hunter, if I remember correctly, Macross for some reason, which may not be a Capcom thing. They may just be a licensing deal. But I've loved Udon Street Fighter comics since they originally debuted back in the early 2000s. I've got, I believe, every Street Fighter comic that they've published, like as part of their Capcom stuff. Every Street Fighter, Rival Schools, and Darkstalkers issue or miniseries that they've done. The only trick of that is Udon has not published an ongoing series for quite a while. They've basically been putting out either a series of miniseries or one-shots for the past 8 years, maybe almost 10. I think Street Fighter Unlimited was their last ongoing, and that ran for 12 issues before it ended. So anyways, I'm always excited to see some new Udon stuff coming out. And the Rival Schools is one of the Capcom properties that Udon can't quite seem to get to work. Like I said, they've done a number of Street Fighter comics over the years. They've done a handful of Darkstalkers, just like a couple miniseries, which admittedly, a couple miniseries is still pretty good. But Udon tried to do a Rival School series back in the mid-2000s, if I remember correctly. And they only ever published 2 issues, and then the series got canceled. I'm assuming from low sales, and they've never attempted it again. We have seen Rival School characters show up in other Street Fighter stuff, so clearly there is an interest there internally. They just can't quite seem to make it work financially, seems to be the deal. So I was very excited for a Street Fighter Rival Schools crossover. This particular comic was written by David Lumsden, with art by Tovio Rogers, lettering by Marshall Dillon. And the story is basically that a couple of the Rival School characters find this mysterious character, like, in the back alleys of the city, and then they go around trouncing the students from the other schools, and we end up following the main cast of Rival Schools, like the good guy characters, as they try to figure out, like, who is this and how do they get their reputation back. And it turns out that these 2 dorks found Dan Hibiki, who is like the lame version of Ken and Ryu, the 2 like main Street Fighter characters. They found him in a back alley with Blanca, the green and orange-haired wild man who can generate electricity. And they beat up Dan, and then then they're like, Blanca, you should join our school, bro. And then together they go around beating up teenagers. It's silly and it's stupid. I think it's a really clever use of Blanca, who has kind of been an ignored character for the most part in the Street Fighter comic books. But they play with the idea that, like, Blanca was a child who got experimented on and turned into this monster, but he's still very much just, like, a kid at heart. He's never had an education. He's never grown up, so to speak. He just got forced into the world fighting tournament or whatever you want to call it. So it was really fun. I do like the idea. I do think that there's so many characters that the rival schools cast doesn't really get a chance to shine. Like, I ended up just thinking of everybody in like character shorthand where I'm like, oh, that's this thing's Vegeta. Oh, that's this thing's that guy. Like, type of thing. Whereas with like the Street Fighter stuff, I feel like I have a pretty good knowledge of who those characters are and what their personalities are. Rival schools, pretty much unknown to me. I never even played the Rival Schools game when I was younger. So I do think from a story perspective, this wasn't super great. I do feel like it drops the ball a little bit. I love the idea. The characters don't really come through for me for the most part. The artwork's kind of hit or miss, I would say. Some scenes look really good. Some scenes are really crowded. I would argue that if Udon has had one weakness over the course of their publishing life, it's that they put too much writing into comic books that are very focused on being artwork comic books. Obviously, this is a comic book about fighting, and Street Fighter and Darkstalkers and Rival Schools all have characters who do like specific moves with specific names, and Udon really does try to capture like. Thank you for blowing some raspberries. Udon does try to capture those things in the comic, but that means that you have such really cool looking action scenes, but then you try to read the comic and it just is a mess. Like, here's a look at that's Blanca in his school uniform. Like, that's dope. Like, that's stupid and silly and I love it. And it's pretty cool. And anyways, like I said, for the most part, I did enjoy it. I do think this is probably one of the least interesting overall one-shots that I've gotten for Free Comic Book Day from Udon. But I did like it. I love the idea of Blanca joining the Rival Schools cast as a student at these schools. I think that's hilarious because he's like a 6'5", like huge dude. And everyone else is, I mean, admittedly, they're ripped teenagers, but they're all just like ripped teenagers. It's, like I said, I think it's funny. There was a short backup comic at the end which features the school nurse, who's of course more than a school nurse, battling Chun-Li, and they don't really give you like a good reason. Like, I did guess the reason of what was going on almost immediately once I started reading. But you basically get to watch them go back and forth and fight each other until it's revealed that Chun-Li didn't want to get a shot because they hurt. And so she gets a shot in her butt, and like that ends the comic. It's cute. It's fun. It's a silly reason for them to fight, but again, for like kind of a throwaway standalone story, I think it works really well, and it's a good display of both of the characters. Who drew this one? I did really like the artwork. Art by Royce Southerland. Southerland? Why not Sutherland? I don't know. That's his name, though. Royce Southerland. I do think artistically that one worked really well. That worked better for me than Rival Schools did. But, you know, what are you going to do? I'd give it a B if I were going to grade it. I liked it, but I don't think it's the greatest thing that I've ever read. I don't think it's the best Free Comic Book Day they've ever put out. But that's okay. I also got from Udon the Megaman Free Comic Book Day issue. Udon's got 5. I think it's 5, right? 5? They've got 5 Mega Man one-shots coming out this year in a storyline they're calling Mega Man Timelines, which is going to feature 5 different Mega Mans. And I believe the idea is that there's a story going on that is going to connect these 5 stories together. Despite Udon having the Mega Man license for a good long while, they don't put out a lot of Mega Man stuff. And I've got a weird fascination with Mega Man. He is one of those characters who, like, when I was a kid, was super famous, like, back in the 90s. Like, you heard about Mega Man, but I never had a Mega Man video game growing up. I didn't play Mega Man until I was in, like, my teens or early 20s, and I will freely admit, they don't do anything for me. It's just not a style of gameplay that I really enjoy. They're too high on gameplay, not enough story. And growing up, I was definitely like a story guy. I like my JRPGs and my RPGs. But that said, I remember getting Nintendo powers when I was a kid and like getting to see all the designs for like the Mega Man boss characters like Cut Man and Flame Man and Ice Man and whatever. That stuff fascinated me. I think that Mega Man has some of the strangest, coolest, most interesting character designs in like what I would consider classic gaming. And so I've always kind of had a vague fascination with the character. Yeah. My buddy Ephraim is a big Mega Man fan, and so when we were looking at what we were going to pick up, he saw Mega Man. He was like, "Oh yeah, yeah," and he was like, "Oh, I'll get that." And I went, "You know what? I think I'll get it too." And I do have to admit that it's fun. In the comic, you end up basically spending the issue with a bunch of Mega Man's former villains recanting these stories of like they're basically all food cart vendors now, and they are telling the story to each other of this is the time that I fought Mega Man and this is how he showed me to be a good guy and now I'm a food cart vendor. So it's about how all these characters went from being enemies to being Mega Man's friends, which admittedly doesn't do a lot of character work for Mega Man, but I do think it's a really fun way of keeping Mega Man as this kind of like silent protagonist that he is from the video games, while still giving you characters who have plenty of life and personality. And as someone who, like, if I were to connect with Mega Man, I connected with the villains more than Mega Man himself. And I think this is a really cool way of kind of connecting that, where I'm like, I like the villains better anyways. And having read this story, I still like the villains better anyways. They're fun, they're silly, they're a little bit dopey, which is kind of how I want my villains. Especially in like a aimed at younger audiences comic book. You gonna stand for me a little bit? Yeah, you go wiggle. This comic does have a variety of artists. Oh, let me crack this one open. Yeah, you getting me? Story by Travis Maiden, art by Andrew Dickman, Kenny Ruiz, Edwin Hung, Jeffrey Chamba Cruz. I've seen Chamba do some Street Fighter stuff, and I think he's really fantastic. He does the cover for Mega Man, actually. You can see his signature down there in the little thing. But I like Chamba's line work. I like his colors. I think he's got a good sense of action. I do have to say that I do think that Udon needs a better or more experienced editor overall for its projects. There was at least one spelling mistake that I found in this particular issue, and one spelling mistake really isn't that big of a deal in the overall product. But for me, it's more of a like, this is the one Mega Man comic that you're putting out to promote the Mega Man timelines thing. And like, Udon doesn't really promote the rest of their comics very well. There's a series of Street Fighter Masters one-shots coming out throughout the course of 2025, and I follow Udon on social media. You would not know that there's going to be a series of comics coming out later this year. You would not know that Mega Man's coming up. So A, they need to work on their social, and then B, if you're putting out a comic to promote another comic, I want to know that's a quality product. That means there shouldn't be spelling mistakes. That means I should be able to read it perfectly. I'm not going to say that mistakes don't happen. Sometimes they do, and it just sucks. I think it was my copy of Mega Man. Oh, I don't remember. One of the books that I have for Free Comic Book Day has a printing error in it, where there's just a big smear of ink going down one side of the comics. Like, I get it. Printing errors happen, accidents happen. But the fact that a spelling mistake is coming out, I think is kind of a little bit unprofessional, and I think it goes to show you that, like, Udon doesn't put out a lot of comic books. And I think that lack of overall experience, even if they've got this huge body of work, I think the individual talent isn't quite there as far as this part of it. They were like too much on dialogue, not enough on telling a good like action-based story, and I think when they do rely on dialogue, that leads them open to dialogue errors and the such. What you doing? What you doing? Did I hear mommy? I don't know. Let's go check. Whew. Okay. I'm back. I got Kari in her little bouncy chair. Hopefully she'll be okay for these last two. Last two comics I got. Skybound's Energon Universe one-shot. Of course, I got Skybound's Energon Universe one-shot. I've really been enjoying Skybound's comics. I think they've been great so far. I won't lie. G.I. Joe hasn't really been doing much for me. Man, look at that. Look how cool Hound looks. Oh, what a dope looking dude right there. G.I. Joe is probably the weakest overall title in the Energon universe line, but that's fine. Much like last year's entry in Skybound's Free Comic Book Day issue, this book serves as kind of a bonus moment between some of the most recent issues of their various comic books. We do get to see G.I. Joe character Clutch, featured here on the cover. If you couldn't guess, his thing is cars. He discovers Hound, who is an Autobot military jeep. He discovers Hound, they encounter each other for the first time, and up until this point, the only interaction that the G.I. Joe have had with transforming robots has been with Starscream, when he murdered somebody. So he sees Hound, and he's like, oh no, I'm not playing with this, and he attacks Hound, and Hound spends the whole time being like, I don't mean you any harm, I'm just looking for information, please calm down. And so when they do fight, it's your classic superhero misunderstanding fight. They eventually do smooth things over, and you get this idea of like, oh, they're probably going to be working together a little bit in the future, which is great. Hopefully we'll see that reflected in G.I. Joe. I don't think we're going to see it reflected in Transformers until we get to like a big crossover, but I would love it. I won't lie, like my Transformers heart, which I've really been exploring in the past year, is really an 86 guy, Hot Rod, Ultra Magnus, Blur, Springer. Like that group of characters is the group of characters that I keep in my core the most. But I grew up on G1, and I always had a lot of love for Hound because I think he's got a very specific design, and I think he's one of the characters got like superpowers in the cartoon, and I just always liked him. Like, you know, I'm not going to say that I have a deep love for the character, but he's one of those characters that I had like a character crush on. So I love that he's getting involved in things. We do see that events over in Void Rivals have kicked off and gotten the attention of the Quintessons, who look like they're going to be launching a war. The book ends with a tease for the Quintesson War, I believe it is. Yeah, the Quintesson War begins in Void Rivals issue 25. And yeah, overall, this issue, was it written by all of them? Yeah. The stuff with Clutch and Hound was written by Joshua Williamson, who's been writing the main G.I. Joe comic book anyways. Transformers was written by Daniel Warren Johnson. Ooh, I'll get into that in a second. And then Void Rivals was written by Robert Kirkman. So all of the writers of the individual books do get involved for their particular casts and characters. The Transformers part of the book was, to me, it was really interesting because it was focused on Jazz, who's of course one of those characters who's a little bit weird because his name is based on like an art form of art, right? Jazz is a type of music. It's not a mechanical thing. It's not a car thing. So why would you have this character from an alien planet who has a very Earth-based name? That's weird, you would think. And I won't lie, as a kid, never even occurred to me that that's weird. I just did not care. But it introduced the idea that Jazz has been, or was, on Cybertron. He would be playing with like an old school like radio, and he would pick up radio frequencies from Earth. Yeah, I'm going. And for those who don't know, radio frequencies do just continue to travel. Like, we are broadcasting, anything that's on radio just goes out into space for anybody to potentially pick up. And apparently, Cybertron picked up what they considered to be this weird form of noise. Just sounds like nothing good. And Jazz ended up getting kicked out of a band that he had with RC, Cliffjumper, and I forgot who the last member is, which I think that's really funny and cool. Like, I don't think anyone's ever really explored what Cybertronian music sounds like, so that's pretty neat. But Jazz is way too freeform to work with the rest of the group, who want like structured written music, and Jazz just wants to go with the flow, right? And they get to Earth, and the Autobots are driving through a city, and Jazz hears that noise that he heard back on Cybertron, so he transforms and checks it out, and he's looking into an old, like, New Orleans jazz bar. And Optimus Prime is like, Jazz, is that the noise you've been looking for? And Jazz is like, I don't know, but it's close. And this is also really neat because in the Transformers fan community, there's a strong belief that Jazz is very much African-American coded. He is black coded. Judging by the type of music that he listened to and his voice actor and the way his voice sounds. And so this is a nice nod and a wink to that idea that Jazz is tied to black culture in America. And so that's really cute as well. I love seeing that kind of understanding of not just the character, but like the fandom that exists around the character as well. The only downside is that means I need 3 copies of this book in order to go in each of the individual runs, and I haven't had any chance to try and get them, so probably going to end up paying for those somewhere down the line. But I really like this issue. I think it's really good, and it serves as a good snapshot of the Energon universe. Okay, for my last comic, this is one that I did not know was coming out, but when I saw it, I got very excited because I have been paying attention to this line that's coming up. I got IDW's Godzilla, the New Heroes. I'm a big Godzilla fan. I love the Godzilla movies. You can see I got a bunch of keychains behind me. I've got a nice cloth up there that's got Godzilla on it. I'm a big fan of Godzilla. I will freely admit, Godzilla comics typically don't do anything for me. The idea of taking a like 500-foot tall monster and shrinking him down to like a 2x3-inch character in a comic book does nothing for me. I don't think Godzilla comics look impressive in terms of size and scale. I don't think they're very interesting. I've tried reading a number of them over the course of my comic collecting career, and they just don't work for me. And so when IDW announced that they were going to be doing their first Godzilla universe of titles, that caught my attention, because typically IDW just does like mini-series. Here's a Godzilla story, buy our 5 issues, thank you very much. And then you would just move on to the next thing. With very little continuity, if any continuity, between them. Where the idea with this is there are 3 titles set within a shared universe that's very different from any other Godzilla universe you've seen, and we'll probably get an Energon universe kind of thing where they interact with each other at some point, but for now at least they're solo titles. And of course this comic previews the 3 of them, the first of which is Godzilla, written by Tim Seeley, art by Nicola Zmezja? Really unsure on that one. Colors by Marissa Luis, letters by Brian Kolick. And the idea here is that Godzilla was created in 1954, or was unleashed in 1954. We're told in the story that it awakened a slumbering beast, so I'm assuming Godzilla exists and he just woke up. And he was pissed! And kaiju have been raining destruction down on Earth ever since. To the point where, like, we meet New York City within the issue, and it's literally like a walled-off island to protect it from kaiju. Like, that's how bad things are. The American Northwest is like a big smoking crater. It's called the Deadlands. Godzilla's this big, toxic, green-looking monster. He's just big and mean, and he destroys everything. And in the course of this first issue, we meet a group called G-Force, which is a group of characters who appear to be, like, powered by kaiju. Humanity is, like, mutating along the same lines as kaiju, so not everybody, but the characters in G-Force anyways, are developing, like, superpowers, and so that way they can hopefully fight back against the kaiju. And we do meet a handful of these characters over here. Hopefully I'll edit in a better looking image than that. But the issue is basically spent with the leader of G-Force, Colonel Riviera, giving us a recap of the history of the situation and what's been going on, and then introducing us to one of the lead characters of Godzilla New Heroes, Jason Braid, a guy who's got the power to punch Godzilla. Like, literally, we see him punch Godzilla, Godzilla notices it, and then swaps at him with his tail. Somehow this guy survives, and at the end of the issue he's introduced to G-Force, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna kill Godzilla. And that's it. And I gotta admit, I didn't like this almost at all. The book spends most of the issue with us listening to Colonel Riviera. Hang on. But the first character we meet who we're kind of sympathetic with is Dr. Rumi Chiba. She's a Japanese woman. And she is basically like, she's presented as the voice of reason. And Oliviera is is shown to us as like the really like, he's the military guy and I don't care about your opinion. You just shut up and do what I tell you to do kind of character. So like immediately, I don't like him, which does set up an interesting dynamic between him and Rumi, where she's like science and facts. And he's like, I don't care. Go anyways. That's a good group dynamic, but he's still an unlikable character. Rumi doesn't get enough of focus to be our main character, and then ending on the hook of Jason feels like the book doesn't know what it's trying to tell me. Like, we're trying to set up a universe here, but like I feel like it would have worked much better to just have the story follow Jason through his encounter with Godzilla up to the point where like he punches Godzilla in the leg and Godzilla swats him, and you would just have him go blank. And then when he wakes up at the end of the issue, you would have the weird group that is G-Force standing over and be like, "Hey, we hear you're the kid who punched Godzilla. We're G-Force. We're gonna kill Godzilla." And then your next story would be him being recruited to the team. Because I don't like any of these characters. I don't know enough about any of them to be won over to their particular story. And like, I think the world's interesting, but that's it. And for a first issue introduction, I think this is a really weak introduction. Yeah, you're going for it. The second story is Godzilla Escaped the Dead Zone. As I mentioned before, the Pacific Northwest in this particular universe has been obliterated by kaiju. Like, it's filled with monsters and people who are mutating due to radiation. This particular story was written by Ethan S. Parker and Griffin Sheridan, art by Pablo Tunica, letters by Brian Kolek. And I have to admit, like, artistically, I liked this story a lot better. It's grimy, it's dirty, it's murky, it's messy. The character that we follow throughout it, I don't believe is ever given a name. He's just called the Wanderer. But it looks like he can kind of mutate to meet the threat of whatever it is that he faces, which is pretty interesting and gives him an ever-evolving set of powers as the story goes on. But, you know, the story basically shows him, like, finding this kaiju and taming it and then using it as a mount. That tells me nothing as far as an ongoing story or a character depth. It gives me an interesting concept for a character, but that's pretty much it. So Escape the Dead Zone did not really impress me, unfortunately. And then we've got Starship Godzilla, which is my favorite concept out of all of them. Written by Chris Gooch, art by Oliver Ono, letters by Brian Kolek again. And the idea here is that they took Mechagodzilla and then they shot it into space. So Mechagodzilla is literally like a spaceship now, traveling the universe, which I think is crazy and stupid and pretty cool. The Godzilla universe is filled with all kinds of strange and interesting aliens. A bunch of kaiju threats have come from outer space in Godzilla mythology. So the idea that humanity was finally like, let's go deal with these people, I think is fun and makes a lot of sense, and it gives you a lot of interesting storytelling opportunities. I do think it's a weird pick in that the story is focused around a group of characters. Let's see if we can get some names. Ilsa, a guy referred to as Boss. Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep. Yeah, wow, we get no character names otherwise. We basically meet two characters who are stealing kaiju eggs from an alien world or planet or colony or something along those lines. And then at the end, they get rescued by Starship Godzilla. This is the funnest concept to me. It's the weirdest concept to me. Why are they stealing kaiju eggs? But yeah, we don't really get to know the characters at all. It's running on pure, like, isn't this crazy? And I have to admit, yeah, it is. And I had a good time with it. I don't know if I'm going to get to pick up any of the Godzilla books. I don't suspect I'm going to be able to, but I will be paying close attention to these books as they debut and keep coming out. You getting done? Okay, give me just a sec. I'll wrap it up. As you can see, my baby's getting fed up with me talking about comic books, so I'm going to cut this here. That was my free comic book day. What did y'all pick up? Did you get anything good? Is there anything that I missed that I should have read? Please let me know. Thank you all for your patience, and we will see you next time, whenever that is. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.